Hello, St. John's Prep. So congratulations, you made it through Chapter 1 of Latin, and we are now on to Stage 2, in which we are going to learn more about nouns, how they work in a sentence, how to recognize them, everything you need to know about nouns. Well, just about everything you need to know about nouns you're going to be at least introduced to in this chapter. First things first, let's talk about how to recognize a noun. This is a list here of all the nouns you've seen in Chapter 1 and 2 of the Cambridge Latin course so far, and I hope you notice that most of these nouns have three forms. They have, a noun form followed by a second one, followed by a letter in parentheses. And that's going to be a pattern you're going to see for the entirety of your Latin career. So one main thing that you need to know is if you see a word that has two forms followed by a letter in parentheses, that indicates that it's a noun. So you can think to yourself, okay, this is going to be a person, a place, a thing, an idea. It's not going to be a verb, it's not going to be an adjective. This letter in parentheses, whether it's an M, an F, or an N, indicates the word's gender. So if it's M, it's going to be masculine. If it's an F, it's going to be feminine. And if it is an N, it's going to be neuter. Some of these genders are based on the true gender of something. For example, a farmer would be considered masculine versus a wife would be considered feminine, but not always, because a bedroom is considered neuter, whereas a table is considered feminine. So the idea of gender is not terribly rational to those of us who speak English, which does not have a gender system per se, but to the Romans it was natural, and gender does play a pretty important role in how a noun works. One thing to think about with English is, the fact that we call every ship she. That is kind of a holdover of an old-fashioned gendered language from the past. So we've talked about gender now, and we've talked about the fact that canis is M, masculine, toga is feminine, servus, slave, is also masculine. So now the next step is to talk about what these two forms of the noun indicate. I'm going to throw some terms out at you. You'll become familiar with them over the next few days, but servus here and toga and canis, that first form of the noun that you're given, is what's called the nominative case. And that will mean a lot more to you down the road, but basically that's the most fundamental case of this noun. If it's going to be the subject, the dog barks, it's going to be canis. The toga is white, it's going to be toga. The slave is working in the garden, servus. So that's the nominative case. It is for the subject of the sentence, and that's how you will look words up in the back of the book when you look them up. This second form here, which is the canis here, and togai, and servi, this is what's called the genitive case. And what's odd about learning the genitive is that your textbook doesn't teach the genitive until chapter 16 or 17. But it's a very important case to know for the primary reason that this ending, this is ending here, this ae ending here, and this I ending here of that genitive form tells us what family or what declension of nouns that a particular noun belongs to. And once you know a noun's declension or family, you know exactly how that noun is going to behave in the Latin language. So even though the term declension is kind of scary, it doesn't mean much to us, think about it as a family or a category of nouns. So just as we categorize animals according to what species they are, whether they're fish, amphibian, birds, mammals, etc., and we categorize food into its various food groups, fruits and vegetables, milk and dairy, every noun is going to fall into a family. The declensions just have numbers, so there's going to be first, second, third, and you got it, fourth and fifth declension nouns. Virtually all the nouns are first to third. That's going to be the focus of this year, but fourth and fifth declension nouns do exist, and we'll talk about them briefly in a second. So why is it so important to know what declension a noun belongs to? Think about the 5 disparate families I have on this slide. The Osbornes, the Kennedys, the royal family, the Obamas, and the Adams family. I can pretty much guarantee that if these 5 families were put in a similar situation, they would behave differently. Invite the Osbornes to a party, your house is going to get trashed. Invite the Kennedys, JFK's going to flirt with all the ladies. Invite the royal family, Charles is going to bore everyone to death and everyone's going to like Princess Di better. Invite the Obamas and everyone's going to wonder what their life is as the president. And invite the Adams family and they're going to suck your blood or do something like that. But same situation, invite them to a party, each family is going to behave differently. Nouns are the same way. If a noun is a subject or a direct object, if it belongs to a first declension, it's going to behave like the Osbornes. If it belongs to the second declension, it's going to behave like the Kennedys, third declension like the royal family, and so forth. What's great about the declension system in Latin, though, is all you have to do is learn the rule for one member of the family, and everybody else behaves the same way. So, if you learn Ozzy Osbourne's behavioral tendencies, you know that the children and the wife, Sharon, I think, are going to behave the same way. So all you need to do is learn the rule for one person in each family, and everybody else is going to behave the same way. Same thing. Learn JFK's rules, and you know that Jackie and John and Carolyn are going to behave the same way. Learn what Princess Di would do, and Charles and the kids are going to do the same thing. President Obama, Michelle, and the 2 daughters, they all behave the same way. So all you have to do is learn what Sasha or Malia are going to do, everybody else the same. And then Adam's family, I don't know any of these people's names, but if you find out what this big guy with the dust thing is, and if you know that he's going to behave a certain way in certain scenarios, everyone in the family is the same. The funny-looking guy, the little kid, the small child, and this person that looks like the cowardly lion from The Wizard of Oz. So let's look back at these 3 nouns that I mentioned a couple slides ago. As I told you earlier, the form you need to look at is the second form, this genitive form, to determine what declension a noun belongs to. And if you look at this ending, the rules are simple. If this second form ends in is, that means it is third declension. If the second form ends in ae, that means it is first declension. And if the second form ends in I, that means it is second declension. Now, you're going to also notice some patterns with these first forms. Virtually every word that is first declension is going to have the pattern AE. A lot of nouns in the second declension will have US here. Some will have a UM. Some will have an ER. Those are most of the endings for second declension. It's the third declension that's the wild card, and you cannot rely on any pattern in this nominative form for the third declension. So that's why it's going to be important that you'll always have these 2 forms given to you, the first and the second, because the first provides, if it's the subject, what it's going to do, and the second form tells you what declension it is, and I'm going to tell you one more thing that's important about the second form, that genitive case, in the next slide. So looking at this list of nouns that we started this little video with, you'll notice that there is a collection of nouns that all have this AE here, and that means those are all first declension. Second group, they end in I, and those are all second declension. And then this third group, IS here, those are third declension nouns, and that's how you tell what family they belong to. Now, the important thing about this genitive form is also that we get the stem or the base of a noun from the genitive form. It's not going to be very important for first and second declension nouns, and we'll talk about why that is down the road, but especially for third declensions, you have to go to this genitive form and take off the ending in order to determine the base or the stem or the foundation upon which you are going to trade out endings. So the stem for dog is CAN. spelled the same way, nominative and genitive, so that's not much of a surprise. The stem for mater, though, is M-A-T-R, and you notice that if you use the first form there'd be an E there, but the second form the E drops out, and that's the base upon which you're going to add endings for the entire year. Same thing with mercator, mercatoris. You take off the IS, and the stem is mercator, and that's what you're going to add the endings on to. Pater, patris, the stem is P-A-T-R. The same thing's going to go for second declensions and firsts as well, but it's not quite as important because very seldom is there a change in spelling. But for third declension, there will very often be a change in spelling between the nominative and the genitive, and you need to look at the genitive to determine the base and the stem of the noun. So let's review what we've talked about. We've talked about every noun has a gender, whether it's masculine, feminine, or neuter. And you can recognize nouns in vocabulary entries because they have either an M, an F, or an N in parentheses next to them. We talked about declension, which is the family or the category of a noun. We've so far been introduced to first, second, and third declension nouns. Eventually you will meet fourth and fifth declension nouns. We've talked about those two forms of the noun that you're given, the nominative and the genitive. The first form, the nominative, is used for the subject of the sentence. The genitive, which we're not going to use in sentences in your textbook for a while, but that form tells us by its ending what the declension is, whether it's AE1 or I2 or IS3, and then if you remove that ending from the genitive form, you have the stem or the base of the noun. And then what we're going to work on for the rest of this chapter is the fact that if you take the base of a noun and you add different endings, that is going to determine the grammatical function of a noun in a sentence, whether it's the subject, whether it's the direct object, whether it's the object of the preposition, etc., etc. So the base plus the endings, that's the key here. With this introduction, I think you're ready to watch a few other videos and do some worksheets, and then you'll have a pretty good understanding of the foundation of nouns. Good luck!